this is an interesting time we're in, but it's a very challenging time, and that's really why we're going to talk about the topic we're covering this morning, which is around mental health and well-being. So this topic I normally deliver in a full day. So I've got 20 minutes this morning, so you can imagine it's been a bit of a challenge for me to condense my content, which is why I've set a timer, because I'm going to try and keep myself on track. I'll be happy to take any questions at the end. I won't try and read the chat questions as they come in, because that will just distract me and slow me down. So I'm going to rattle through my content and then answer any questions at the end. I hope that's okay for everybody. I do like to take questions as we go, but with a tight time scale, I'm going to try and stick on track. So I am going to share my screen. You don't want to see my close-up of my face for the entire time I'm talking. So bear with me. I am going to get some slides up. Slideshow. There we go. Hopefully that is working and everyone can see. The title for today's topic is looking after my team's well-being, and I appreciate not everybody on the call's got a team of employees, but we all have people around us. So what I'm going to try and cover this morning is a bit about how you can look after your own well-being, the things we need to be aware of for ourselves and then for those around us. And I'm going to touch on how we can approach this kind of conversation, which can be quite a tricky conversation to have with somebody if we're concerned about them. So I'll see how we get on for time. And I will, of course, be happy to share the slides around afterwards. Even if we don't get to cover all of them this morning, there might be some bits and bobs in there that are useful for you to read up on afterwards. So I thought it was just worth setting the scene. What do we mean by mental health and well-being? Well, mental health is something we all have. When we enjoy positive or good, strong mental health, we have a sense of purpose and direction. We are able to do the things we want to do. We're able to face the challenges that life throws at us. We're able to deal with ups and downs. It's a scale, mental health. We all have it. We're just somewhere on a scale with it. In the same way with our physical health, we all have physical health. We are just stronger or not so strong at certain times of our life. So the mental health scale I've got on the screen there, you've got positive mental health on the far left. This is when we can face all these challenges that life's throwing at us. We're resilient. Resilience is a really important word. We're going to talk about resilience a lot when we talk about well-being. We all face mental health challenges. Life, particularly at the moment, is throwing numerous challenges at us. We're all having additional worries and stress at the moment that we couldn't foresee. And this is why it's such an important topic, even more so at the moment than normal. So the mental health scale moves across. On the far right, you'll see there, this is clinically diagnosed mental illness, such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, general anxiety disorder. These are serious, complex illnesses that need diagnosis and treatment. They're quite often lifelong, but that doesn't mean they have to be limiting. So with management, with support, whether that be through talking therapies or some sort of drug treatment, we can actually resolve and manage these conditions in the same way we can manage lots of long-term physical health conditions. So we're going to think about what well-being is and how that matters, how that helps us keep them to the left-hand side of the mental health spectrum there. So well-being is really about how resilient we are, how able we are to deal with issues, to deal with crisis, to deal with unexpected challenges. And I'm going to talk through some ways we can all work on building our resilience. Now, there are numerous models. There are thousands of different models. You do a quick Google search for well-being, and there are loads of ideas out there on the internet, loads of people talking about this sort of stuff. I'm using the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, which is the NHS commissioned research, because I think it's a simple, clear structure to help us focus our minds. Some of the frameworks I've looked at have been too many steps and very, very daunting, too complex. So I think this is a nice, simple structure for us to think about personally. Are we doing all of these things? And I've seen this suggested as pillars. So to keep ourselves at our peak of resilience, our peak of mental health, we need to be focusing our attention on all 5 pillars. And if one area is slipping, that's going to put us out of kilter, out of balance, and we're going to be less resilient to the challenges that we face. So very briefly, hopefully they're quite self-explanatory. To keep ourselves well and in a state of well-being, we need to connect. We need to connect with the people around us. And I would say now more than ever, we need to be focusing on connections. Spend time developing relationships, get on video, actually see someone, FaceTime your mum, FaceTime your family, those that you're not in isolation with. Get out there and get connecting. It is important to have human connection through video or telephone calls rather than just using email and other text messages. Texting can be very isolating. So we really need to be thinking about how we're going to make the eye contact, how we're going to see people's body language, how we're going to actually make those connections. And now more than ever, we need to be focusing on these connections. Now, obviously, I work for a HR company, so most of the training I deliver is to managers. So when I deliver this to a team of line managers, we're talking about connecting through one-to-ones, connecting through appraisals, and connecting as a team. And all of those relationships are really important. And for us in our homes and in our personal lives, they're just as important. We need one-to-one relationships, and we need to have a group of people around us that we can support and they can support us in return. Be active. Lots has been said recently, hasn't it, about getting our one piece of daily exercise. Make sure you do take your exercise every day. Make sure you do something. It doesn't have to be the 5K. Who's seen the 5K challenge where you have to run 5K and then nominate 5 more people and we're all donating money to the NHS for it? If that's too challenging, start with something smaller. Start with a jog around your garden. Start with an online Joe Wicks exercise class, although he's very, very difficult. I did Joe Wicks yesterday morning and can't walk today. So if you're going to go for Joe Wicks, take it easy. Exercise is really important. Being active, moving away from our screens, especially if we're working from home or we're not necessarily quite as set up as we would be in the office. So you might not have a height adjustable desk at home. You might not have a chair that supports your back properly. So taking regular breaks from your screen and from your work is even more important at the moment than it normally would be. If possible, get outside for that exercise. There is lots and lots of research that being around nature, being around trees and getting sunlight is actually going to do an awful lot, both for your physical health as well as your mental health. Now, the next of the 5 ways to wellbeing is take notice. And this is sometimes called mindfulness. So it's being really aware of what's around you and taking time to focus mindfully on what is surrounding you, what can you hear, what can you see, what can you feel. Now, in itself, this is a great thing to do. There are loads of apps that will help you talk you through it. You might have heard of Headspace, some of the other apps that are available, or you could try an online yoga class, anything to get you focusing and being aware of how you fit into the world. This is also really important if you're feeling any sort of anxiety or panic attacks. One of the first things, the first set of advice for resolving a panic attack is to take notice of your surroundings. List 5 things you can see, 5 things you can hear, and 5 things you can actually physically touch, and touch them. So that's a really good way of keeping our minds involved in what's around us and grounding ourselves if we're struggling. Now, keep learning. This is an interesting one. Keep learning, keeping our minds active is important all the time. This is long-term NHS advice. And you'll have all seen the Twitter arguments about if you don't come out of lockdown with a new skill, then it wasn't lack of time, it was lack of dedication. And actually, be a bit kinder. Let's be a bit kinder to ourselves. Yes, it's important to keep learning. Yes, it's important to keep our minds active. But if you haven't got time, to take on, to go and learn a new language or take an online cooking course. Well, actually, we're all juggling an awful lot of things at the moment. So choose something that will help you not stress you out. So I think it's really interesting. So the NHS advice here on this one, to keep learning, says learning new skills can give you a sense of achievement and new confidence. So why not sign up for that cooking course? Start learning to play a musical instrument or learn something work-related. But actually, if you're struggling to keep your head above water and balance and juggle all the things that are happening in your life, working from home, particularly if you've got children around you and you're trying to homeschool them, you might have financial worries, we might be caring for neighbours and elderly relatives, and actually even just going to a supermarket at the moment is quite a challenge, isn't it? So I don't know if anyone's been out recently, but I went to Asda yesterday and it took me 2 hours to do a food shop with all the queuing at either end of the shop. So be kind and only learn or try something that works for you. Do not use this as a stick to beat yourself, is my overriding comment on this point. Now, give is a really interesting one. So give is give your time, give money, give a smile even. It's been proven that when we give to other people, that gives us a sense of well-being, and that gives us a boost. So whatever you can give, and that might not be time or money at the moment, it might just be give some support to somebody. Write someone a letter that you've not been in touch with for a while. Have a video call with somebody who's not getting out very often. Pick up someone else's shopping when you do your own. So there are loads of little ways we can give, and actually what this does is really boosts our self-confidence and our respect for ourselves. So these are the 5 pillars that we need to be thinking about all the time, but particularly at the moment when we're all under such additional pressure from unexpected pressures from this sort of time we're in now. I'm just checking my timer. Oh, I'm never going to get through all my slides. Right, so this was an important one. Stress is another important point. So I don't know if anyone's seen this before. This is a really interesting analogy. How heavy is this glass of water that you're holding out in front of you? My imaginary glass of water that I'm holding. How long can you hold that glass for? 1 minute? Fine. An hour? It's getting a bit achy. A day? A week? A month? Now, this is an analogy to think about the stresses that we're under. When we've got short-term stresses, and we're fairly physically robust, we're fairly mentally robust, we can deal with those challenges in the short term. When the challenges and the stress goes on for longer, it obviously becomes much harder for us to deal with. Stress in itself isn't a mental illness, but too much or constant stress can cause us mental health issues and affect our ability to deal with everyday tasks. So stress comes from all different directions. We don't normally hold glasses of water out in front of us, but we do have pressures that come at us from all different directions. And I would say, what can you do to either alleviate them for yourselves or reduce them? And what can you do to help those around you? So talking to you as leaders of businesses, as family members, as friends and as colleagues, how can we, as a community, help each other and help those that we know and we support? How can we help them? Can we take away any of these actual issues? If you're a line manager, allowing someone to work flexibly is an absolutely instant one. So, yeah, I'm not expecting you to work 9 hours a day from home while you're trying to homeschool your twin 6-year-olds. I'm going to we're going to look at results. So this is a perfect opportunity for us as line managers, as leaders of businesses, to be able to take away that stress immediately. I think it's now important to think about how we recognise when we or those around us are suffering from mental distress. I've got a whole list of things on the screen there, and you might know someone that displays lots of these, but if they've always displayed these symptoms, these behaviours, then that's who they are. What we're talking about here is a change in someone's behaviour. So when the stress or pressure on them has built up so much, or the anxiety that they're under at the moment has tipped into a problem, it's causing them some sort of mental distress, and you might see a change in their behaviour. So these are unexpected behaviours. We'll probably find it very hard to see these early warning signs in ourselves, so it's important that we talk to the people around us and we have this support network so that they can point them out to us and we can point them out to them. Once we recognise any of these early warning signs or any of these changes, and I think as a conscientious person, as a member of a team, as a leader of a team, as a family member, as a friend, we know the people around us, and we will recognise when things change. How do we talk about it? This is hard stuff to talk about. This is difficult. There's all sorts of bias. You'll all be aware of this. There's all sorts of bias in our culture that mental health isn't real. People who have mental health issues are weak, or are making it up, or should just get over it. And we hear horrible, horrible suggestions from, I try not to go out of my bubble too often. I've got a lovely friend bubble. I've got great colleagues. I've got lots of lovely people I work with. But of course, we work with 140 different clients as a company. And we hear, so I do go out my bubble. I do hear some people coming at these sorts of things from a different perspective to me. And that's part of I feel my role is to sort of educate that actually some of the attitudes that we hear from line managers, things like, oh, that person's skiving, they're off sick, they've said they're stressed, but they're just lazy. And these things won't help. These sort of attitudes don't help us overcome the stigma around mental health. And we do find that lots of people won't admit to a mental health issue as they fear that they won't be believed by their boss, or they'll be ridiculed, or they'll be sacked over it. We try not to work with companies that are like that. We try to do our best to change and challenge them, to change their views, and actually to put people first. So I think it's a really important one to remember, that it's not just in the workplace, but actually all around us. How can we become more approachable? How can we take a more empathetic stance here? When we think about the fact that 1 in 4 people suffer from mental health issues, we all know someone who's struggling or has struggled recently. So we really need to be thinking, actually, how can we support them? How can we help overcome the bias? How can we, as leaders in the community, as leaders in the workplace, as family members, how can we become more open to allowing people to talk to us and bring their problems to us? So the stigma, I'll let you look at Ruby Wax's quotes afterwards when I send this out. I think this is the crux. This is the really important slide. This is the one that says, if you notice these changes, you notice someone's worried, you notice someone's behaving slightly differently or looking under pressure, don't ignore it. Don't bury your head in the sand. It's hard to have the conversation. We're scared. We're quite often scared that we're going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing or make it worse. But actually giving somebody the space to talk to you where they know that you won't ridicule them or disbelieve them, that is so important. Consider how to open the conversation. Has anyone ever asked anyone, how are you? What's everyone's response? Fine. Everyone says, I'm fine. Yeah? So I think it's really important for us to think about how we're going to approach this. So if someone says fine, maybe you push that a little bit more and you say, how are you really feeling? Or I've noticed you haven't seen quite yourself when we've been on our team meetings this week. You've not been joining in the chat as much. You might need to probe a little bit to make sure that the person you're talking to knows that they can open up to you, they can talk to you. It might be that it takes 2 or 3 attempts of you saying, just noticed you've been a bit quiet recently. Is everything okay? And they're not going to open up immediately. Well, that's fine. You're not going to probe, you're not going to force it, but you could just suggest, if you ever want to talk, you know where I am. It's just opening that door a little bit so that they can come to you when they want. Keep the conversation, keep the approach informal. This isn't a management decision. This isn't you as a line manager sitting down and having a conversation with someone. This is you as a human connecting with somebody and offering them the opportunity to talk. I would normally say, have this conversation side by side, walking with somebody or sitting in a car or maybe in a coffee shop in an informal basis. But at the moment, none of those suggestions are allowed. So you're going to have to do it over phone or video if you're not in the workplace with them, which isn't ideal, but it's more important than ever that we approach it and we don't just assume everything's fine. So talking about mental health is daunting, but really my advice to you is listen to them and allow them to vent or share whatever it is they want to share. Don't try and offer solutions. Quite often we're fixers. I know I'm a fixer. Someone comes to me with a problem or something that's not right, my first response is to solve the problem for them. But actually, in this sort of scenario, when we're talking about somebody's mental health and well-being, we're not there to judge or solve or to diagnose. We're just lay people, being a friend, being an active listener, being someone who can be trusted to talk to. Don't diagnose, don't judge, don't solve. Signpost where they can find help if they want it. Say that you'll always be available to talk to them, and make sure you look after yourself. It can be very difficult to support someone else's mental health, so make sure you have a way of releasing your own tension if you found the conversations distressing. Make sure you don't share any confidential information with anybody else, but do find a way of releasing your pressure and your tension, because you're no use to them if you're not looking after yourself as well. What's the phrase? On an aeroplane, you put your own mask on before you help other people. You've got to protect your own well-being to make sure you're strong enough for those around you. So I'm really conscious of the time. These are some of the phrases I was talking about when we hear managers talking about mental health issues. Oh, you're letting the team down. I need someone who's up to the job, that might be more supportive and more empathetic, which we'll send out with the slides. In the short term, what can you do now? I think the key thing I'd like to come out of today's talk is about keeping in touch regularly with everybody that you care about, with everybody that works for you, with those that clients, customers, neighbours, everyone around us. We really need to keep focusing on building those connections. Show you care, show that you're approachable and you're willing to listen. Talk about your own mental health. That's likely to help encourage someone to open up to you. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength to be able to say, I've been struggling and this is what I'm finding is helping me. And some other ideas around the workplace there. So flexible working, what's causing stress for each individual in your team? Do you need some social fun stuff as well as talking about work? And could you share the 5 ways to wellbeing information with those around you? I have a little challenge for everybody on the call. Check in with everyone in your team. Check in with them. Actually, how are they? And are they doing any of these 5 ways to wellbeing? And have they got any ideas? Have they got any suggestions they could share? And are you following those? You need to set the example here. Lead by example. There's loads of information out there. The best sites I've found, the government have just released some information around supporting mental health. But the Mind website is amazing. There's loads of really easily accessible snippets on the Mind website that might be useful for you. And there you go. I'm only a few minutes over and I'm more than happy to take any questions from anyone.
Thank you, Heidi. At the bottom of the participants thing, you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or you can wave at the camera. Jeff's got one, I can see. And Heidi, yes, the one workplace I was running a service workshop, and we had a rather lively Lancashire lad that had a little bit of a temper, and he came in you could sometimes see he came in first thing in the morning wearing a thundercloud. So what I used to do is to get him into the office and say, Jack, just come in the office a minute, and I'd sit down behind behind the desk, and I'd say, right, stand there and have a bloody good shout. And he would. He'd have a good shout, and he may even end up with a few tears coming down his face at the end of it, and it would be about 3 or 4 minutes, and it would completely diffuse the situation for the whole day. I wasn't trained in this sort of thing, but I hope I did the right thing. But all I can say is he didn't upset any of his workmates during the day. So something worked. Over to you,
I love
Heidi.
that, giving someone the opportunity, a safe space to release their tension. I love it. That's brilliant. So can I see questions coming in?
I was going to ask one just on the basis, probably easier. I love the analogy of on the aircraft, put your own face mask on first, because I remember when I was a manager at one point in a big team, and my boss came along and we were going through an immense period of change, and they said, remember, when there's turbulence on the airplane, you're okay because you trust the pilot. But if the pilot looks worried, you're going to start to scream. You're the pilot. Don't let anybody show you're nervous. So the attitude of past was, whatever you do, just be that strong person and actually just sort of weather the storm. Don't ever show any weakness. And there has been this period and years of training associated with that. And what I then sort of over time took the habit of, when you see the pattern of behavior change, the first thing you do is change the environment. So I just go, drop everything, we're going for a walk. And as soon as you get them out, they relax. It's the pattern of behavior I'm struggling with, because now what you're only seeing is you're seeing that short snippet of people that typically have quickly gone and put on their makeup or done their hair or showered and changed to get on a video call that you don't know the fact that they've been the entire week in their pajamas and haven't showered or anything else. So how do you have any great questions, or do you have any great ways that when you get those just little snippets, and this is for me, for my clients, of I'm trying to kind of be intrusive in their life just to make sure they're okay, and trying to kind of open them up in different ways. And some of them are great at it, but some, you really need to prod into areas they're uncomfortable. They're okay talking about money with me, but they're not comfortable talking about, actually, do you know what? I was crying in my office yesterday because I just didn't have anybody to chat to. And you'll never see that in that snippet. So any ideas on how you kind of break that down?
I think it's less about probing and more about showing your approachability, showing that you are open and you are human and you're wanting to make that connection. So it's possibly a longer term conversation. It's going to take time. People will only open up to you if they trust you and they know that they're not going to get any there's no judgment coming from you. And this, I think, is where the talking about our own struggles can help open that. And in the total opposite of your example of the manager needing to be the pilot and being very strong, actually showing your own weakness and humanity is much more likely, I would suggest, in those scenarios to foster that environment where people feel they can open up. If you're displaying a very strong and firm and positive and confident approach, they're not going to feel that you're the right person to open up to. So I think that the two really extreme examples that you've raised in your question there, Jeff, I think that, yes, a leader of an organisation needs to be focused, confident in their abilities. The pilot has to be focused and able to keep us on track, keep us flying in a straight line. But actually, when we're talking about human connections, showing your own weakness and showing your own vulnerability is much more likely to build a stronger, deeper relationship, a more meaningful relationship where people feel they can open up. So I think the kind of questions you can ask are things like, how are you really? How many, I don't know. It's hard when it's clients, actually, because you don't know them yet. But actually, the advice I always give is try and remember people as individuals. So if someone drops into conversation that they're going to visit their elderly mum, the following week when you speak to them, refer back to it. Oh, how was your mum when you went round last week? So it's about making tangible individual connections and remembering details about them that you can refer back to, because actually they will respond to that. Oh, he remembered I was going to see Mum. And using people's names a lot in conversation actually really opens up as well. So using someone's name when you're speaking to them instantly builds a human connection. So it's a really tricky question. You want to ask enough questions and show that you're approachable without probing or being nosy or putting them on the defensive. So it's a really hard balance, I think, there, Jeff.
Well, it's interesting because I wrote, I chose my clients and I split them in, I ran an acid test where I took 10, I split 5 and 5 of those that I thought would open up and those that I thought probably wouldn't. And I just rung my clients to just say, listen, the markets have fallen. We can talk about whatever you want, but actually that's not what I'm here to do. I'm just checking, are you and your family okay? And pretty much the 5 that I thought would open up completely did. And the 5 that I thought would actually go, yeah, fine, focused on business, don't really want to talk about anything else, can you tell me how my investments performed? Pretty much those 5 did. And I'm trying to figure out how to transcend that gap to make it more personal and less about kind of the money side of it for those ones that are not there yet. So it's something I'm not battling with, but I'm trying to figure out how do you move it to that more emotional connection rather than the physical side to kind of help at a time that people just need it. And it's not an easy divide.
Just for them, just knowing that you're available can actually potentially be enough of a release. They might not ever open up to you, and that's not necessarily a problem. Knowing that you've been available for them will have helped.
I'd like to move on now, if we can, to Teresa Ward, who's got a question. My question, or as she says, is the current mental health provision is not good. How is the government going to cope with the increase in mental health provision after the lockdown?
Heidi, do you want me to help with that one?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Sally Ann and I work with Heidi at Reality HR. Lovely to be here and to meet you all. It's a really, really good question, and I think it's probably more of a personal view than anything else really, Teresa, but I would suggest that there's going to be an awful lot of things that the government are going to have to do differently as a result of COVID-19, and they probably don't even know the answers at the moment. I think the one thing we have to hope is that they will continue to invest in the way they have through this crisis, and that will include investment in mental health and wellbeing, because I think, I don't know if anyone saw the news last night, but there was some really scary statistics from the hospitals about people not attending for non-COVID related conditions because they're too worried about going to hospital. I think we'll probably see something similar with mental health. People will be hiding away, pretending they're okay, using that word fine when asked how they are. And I think what we've probably got is a bit of a ticking time bomb with mental health if we're not very careful, which will obviously have an impact on our health service. So I think going back to what the content Heidi was going through, the more we can do as individuals, as business owners, as people, responsible people in society, is to be mindful of our own health, but also those around us, and just do all the little incremental things which will make a huge difference. But it's a brilliant question, and let's hope some of the key decision makers have got it on their radar.
Thank you very much.
Mark had his hand up, and Heidi, would you like to unshare your screen, and then we can see you.
Thank you, Mike. It was just a point, really, that I've noticed, Heidi. One of the factors that you mentioned there was managing your working hours and not working extra hours outside of sort of 9 till 5:30. And certainly, we've noticed that customers that we're working with, several of them have said that they're working late into the night, but they are less decisive, they're less focused, and they're a little bit more erratic in the meetings that we have with them, which is kind of out of character for them, because they're working longer hours, they're sleeping less, and they're not getting out for exercise. So really, that they're missing that structure. But where colleagues have been furloughed, they're now having to pick up that slack. And I think that's having a massive impact on people because they just don't have that resilience anymore.
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge balancing, particularly if you're working from home. We're finding a lot of people we're talking to who are working from home for the first time are actually working all the hours of the day and night because they can't switch off. And definitely setting that routine and that structure around working hours is really important. It's really important to get dressed, start work for your set time, have your break, at the end of your working time, change your clothes, move away from your computer, make a clear delineation between, work time and home time. We used to have a commute that broke it up, and now we don't. So, it's important that we as managers are able to set the expectation for our teams. I think that's internally, that's easy for us to do. So as a manager, it's quite easy to set out with your team, what hours do you want to work, what hours I don't want you to work. It's got to be flexible. It's not necessarily just going to be asking every single person in the team to work from 9 till 3, because actually we've talked earlier about the homeschooling issue, but it's about making sure people aren't working excessive hours. Now, when that's about people outside of your organisation, so if you're talking to clients and customers, that's not quite so easy. I think, again, we can lead by example a little bit, by we can make sure we ourselves and our organisation are not sending emails at 11 o'clock at night. We're not responding to emails at 11 o'clock at night either, or over the weekend. So even if we've got people working at night, so personally, I quite often work in the evenings. I've always worked around my children, so I work few hours during the school day, and then I quite often work at night, but I'll make sure I don't ever send those emails at night. I might write them and then set them on a timer to send in the morning, or get up in the morning and press send. So even saying something like, oh, please don't answer this until Monday, people still are worrying and have read the email. So I think that's all we can do with external organisations is lead by the right example. We use out of office a lot. So in Reality HR, we work, if I'm not working for a day, I'll have my out of office on. So I'm really clear. My clients know that I don't work full time, and I don't work every hour of the day and night, and I'm not always there for answers, but they've always got some support. But it's making sure that they know that it's acceptable for us to say, I'm not working today. We'll be back with you first thing in the morning, or my colleague so-and-so can help. Does that kind of answer your question? I think it's a bit of a challenging one when it's outside of your organisation.
I was just going to add 2 things really quickly. We've produced 2 downloadables which might help. So one is guidance for those working from home, and one is guidance for those managing those working from home. They're both on our website. They're free downloadables, so go and have a look. And then there's also a series of webinars that we're running to support some of that content. So there is one this afternoon on managing remote workers. Is that right, Heidi, this afternoon? Yeah, and all the details to join are on the website. So there might be some further detail around that topic area on the downloadables, and you're welcome to join the webinar.
Just out of interest for people who are arranging meetings, what the communications networks have fed back to us is the traditional working hours when people were based in the offices. They'd see a quick increase in traffic at 9 o'clock, and then that would start petering off at around about 5 o'clock to 5:30. What they're finding now is there's a sharp increase in traffic at 8:30 in the morning, and it starts to peter off at about 4:15 in the afternoon. So people are definitely making the most of family time, walking. In general, they're actually starting to shut their laptops down. So if you are organising meetings, as a trend for people, don't try and book it late in the afternoon, because they really don't want to be there.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
Well, that's a silver lining, maybe.